lunch. Time was a bit short, but we want to get as much into the day as we can for you. This part of our program is about having a panel of experts. So we're doing a kind of everything you ever wanted to know about Messy Church, but we're too afraid to ask opportunity. And so if you do have a question, I'll bring a microphone to you so you can put the question nice and clearly so we can all hear it. Do you want to begin with anything? No? So we'll start with any questions. Do you have any questions? It might be about the theology of Messy Church or practicalities of running one, or anything really. Joe?
Do you have happy teams that help pack up afterwards? Thank you, sister. Happy teams that help pack up afterwards.
Question for somebody with practical experience. Greg?
So one of our Messy churches in Perth City, their Sunday congregation wanted to know how they could help, and so they've got a team of people who come and set up, the Messy Church team who runs Messy Church, and then they have a group of people who come in and help pack up. We've found with ours over the years that we will say to people, if you need to get your children home, please go, please feel free to go. But then there's all these teens and families who will, because they'll say, this is our church, and they stay around and help clean up.
Any other response to that?
Actually, totally agree with that. Everyone helps, and it is a team effort to actually pack everything up. Also using young legs that can run things different directions. How strong are you? Can you take this all the way down something? Does get everything moved in the right place in the right direction, and grateful for that.
And we found some of the families hang around and help clear up. Some of the kids are really keen to collect things up and take them to the kitchen or put them in boxes. And so it becomes, I think that can become part of the community building. But of course, not everybody can stay. We understand that. But it's a way of saying this belongs to everybody, not just the people who are running it. It belongs to everybody who comes. So.
Well, we have retired to Wanganui. We used to run Messy Church in Rotorua, but now we help out with Messy Church in Wanganui. And the Wanganui Anglican Parish has lots of home groups, or they call them missional wells. And they invite each home group to have something missional to reach out to. So our home group has Messy Church as their missional well, and they help with cleaning up and packing up and or setting up, and praying for Messy Church.
So, is that okay?
Now, if for example, we're going to start a Messy Church, how do we raise funds for, all of those craft stuff and the food and sort of that? Know what I mean?
So that's a funding question.
How do you raise funds? Do you belong to a congregation, a church somewhere else? Okay, so when we started our Messy Church after we did the trial, we went back to the church council and we said, if this is something you support, it needs to be a budget item. And it has been ever since. But we also find that we put out an offering bowl at every Messy Church, so they have a chance to give. And we say, like we have some families who it's just single mum, can't afford to put anything in, but we say to them generally, if you can put in what you would spend on a takeaway meal, that's a good place to start. But we also have some families who come along who are quite wealthy. So it's not unusual for... One of the little girls came up and she said, "Psst, my dad put 300 in the offering bowl tonight." And I'm going, "Shh." She goes, "But it was a lot of money." So I think there's ways.
I think if you started up by saying, how do we raise the money for it, I think the difficulty with that becomes a kind of an event in the church life. I think start further back, talk to your church leadership, get them to own it as part of the church program. So, like Greg said, we put a budget line in. We got a budget line in the church budget for it because, Sunday morning worship, we don't ask the question, how are we going to raise funds to run this? We just do it as part of the church program. So I think it's important for churches to own this as a congregation within their program. That doesn't mean to say we didn't ask, invite gifts to it. In fact, can I put that on there? Is that allowed? Yeah, thank you. I don't know, because it's an Anglican church, and I don't know what's sacred and what's not. I'm a Baptist, we're a bit more down to earth with these things. We got the children one week as one of the activities to make the kind of gift box. So it was a cardboard box with a slot in the top, and they just decorated it with crepe paper and things like this. And actually, at the end of the meal, the kids took that round to the tables, and that kind of encouraged people to leave little gifts for us as well. So that wasn't manipulation. That was just, using the kids' enthusiasm. So that's what I'd say. Don't see how do I get your church to try and fund it from the core budget. I know that's not easy with some smaller churches, but I think it's important to get the right ethos behind doing Messy Church.
If you can have a church budget, that's great. It's not always easy to do that. Getting contributions from people in the church helps. So we used to, in Rotorua, have a big cardboard box that was decorated and fancy paper and whatever, and just invite the congregation to put things in it. It might be colouring pencils, it might be paper, scissors, craft stuff that they don't need anymore. We had so much that we had to get an extra storeroom for everything. We had so much stuff, so you don't have to buy everything. It's amazing what people have stashed away, as my granddaughter would say. Definitely ask around. And if you're ever passing through Patararoo and get the chance to go to Messy Church in Patararoo, that's an amazing community there that have had Messy Church running for many years. And it's so effective that community groups actually support it now, because they can see the outreach that there is to the families around in the community. So.
Also think about some of the other material that we're sort of coming to, like Messy Church Goes Wild, where it is outside of the church. It's using the natural resources. It doesn't always have to be things that we buy. You can actually do Messy Church with things that we have and things that are around us as well. So some of that material encourages that as well. The material is really good. It does help you so you don't have to come up with all your own ideas. So it's a good place to start.
One last thing, we've had to learn that we've got to put our FPOS terminal out on Sunday mornings and at Messy Church, because people will come and say, "Oh, we heard what you said about Messy Church. We'd like to give some money to that." So there's the FPOS terminal, and quite often there's a chunk of money goes in, and then they write on the chip Messy Church, washing machine service, food, pantry, those kind of things. It just gives that extra space now that people don't carry cash.
Thank you. Hope that's helpful. As a church leader too, I had to be an advocate for the budget for Messy Church with my church vestry or my board of governors. And I had to be a champion for Messy Church and insist that there be a budget line for Messy Church as part of the outreach, normal outreach of the church. And it helped, I think, for the leadership of that parish to own Messy Church as an outreach and as a very particular ministry. And I think some of you may well be church leaders, and I think you do have a role. You may not feel able to be directly involved in Messy Church, but that's one of the ways you can support it, by being a champion for Messy Church when you're talking with your vestry or your parish council or your board of governors. So, any other questions? Yes, Lorraine.
Yes, I just wanted to follow on a question I'd asked before. It is, how many churches across the UK, say, and New Zealand and Australia, kind of would pick up the whole values of Messy and make it part of their whole church? So I've just wondered what response there might be.
Is that a UK question? Or?
I don't know, but it's a really interesting question. You know, in my journey as a minister, you know, I started in kind of leadership in the late 80s into the 90s. So we went through a program of churches having vision statements and, you know, action plans kind of thing, and goals. And I found actually when I started being a full-time minister, that actually in the churches I was with, that didn't work. And my last church, I arrived there when they had a mission statement and a set of goals, and they'd agreed it under the previous minister. He'd then gone and left, and they put it in a filing cabinet for 18 months till I came along. And I picked it up and I ran with that, and that was fine. And then after about 5 years of that, I thought, we need to redo this again. But I'd kind of gone off the idea of this kind of way, and I picked up the idea of actually values, saying what are our values as a church. So I chose 5 values that the Baptist Union were projecting out into our network. And I do wonder if values are better than goals or mission statements, because they define your boundaries as a community, and then within that boundary you can explore what that might be. So it's an interesting idea of actually having the 5 values of Messy Church shaping your entire church life, in a sense, because they're really good, aren't they? They're overarching more than just Messy Church. So thank you for that. I don't know of any church that has done that. I think one of the difficulties of Messy Church, at least amongst Baptists in the UK, they tend to see it as children's ministry, because it's like a lot of things we've done before. I think we haven't quite made that mental leap into this is church, a whole thing. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you.
You did touch on this a little bit earlier, but at what you just said, how do we then have those conversations with people who insist that actually Messy Church can't stand alone, that you have to incorporate those people into Sundays?
You've been...
First of all, I love data and statistics. So in Australia, before COVID, regular attendance at Sunday morning worship was 1 in 6 weeks. And so I would say to the church council and to other people, well, look, these people turn up for 2.5 to 3 hours once a month. That's more often than most of you come on Sunday mornings. I also say to them that in days when the church was more about small home groups, we didn't always meet on Sunday mornings. We met at other times that were convenient for the life of the community, whether it's after dark, on a weekend at another time. We've fallen into that place where Sunday morning. My other experience is from other parishes in Australia in the last 40 years where Sunday mornings were the weakest congregation, but the Sunday night congregation was the biggest missional congregation at that stage, and it still is in one of those places. It's Saturday evening. It's got to be at the right time for the people you're in. And you've also got to know your community, like read your census data so you know who's there. And I imagine it's the same in New Zealand. They will have an opportunity for people to put their religious affiliation or not on your census data. And like when I went to Bunbury, they were telling me that everybody, all the people with families, had moved away from South Bunbury, where our church is. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I looked up the census data. And then I went back to this same group of people and I said, so where have all the families moved to? And they said, oh, to the new suburbs out on the north side of the city. That's where we need to be going. So then I had great pleasure in getting out the census data and saying, no, the average age of people and the number of people with school age and teenage families around the church was far higher than it was in the new suburb.
I think you just have to keep plugging at it. So the first time we ran Messy Church, I wasn't going to get involved in Messy Church. I stayed in my office, and I had two colleagues, Lisa and John, who went to do Messy Church. She was the new families and pastoral minister. John was the children and youth minister. I'm going to let them get on with it. And so about 2/3 of the way through, I thought, I'll go and see how they're doing. And it was chaos. Because 100 people had turned up. And they weren't geared up for that. So, two things happened from that. I said, okay, I'm going to have to get involved. And that's fine. I wasn't leading, Lisa was leading. But I got myself involved. And the second thing is I went to my deacons and we reported back what had happened. And it happened for the first 6 months. We had a lot of people. And I said, this isn't an event. This is a congregation. Just like you got Sunday morning. So I persisted in that message. I think, again, people were slow to pick that up. Like Greg said, we still have a pattern of commitment. But actually, please do not use the word commitment to me. It's like a red rag to a bull for me, because it's not a biblical word. The only time commitment occurs in the Bible, it's about committing sin. It's not about being part of community. But we have this pattern still of, if you're committed, you're there every week. You're right. I think our patterns of attendance of worship become much more variable than that. So I kept saying to them, don't expect these people to come on Sunday morning. It's a separate congregation. In the end, actually, we used to run every 2 months Messy Sundays in the morning. And partially it was to provide a bridge, but not necessarily to draw them in every week, but to provide a bridge for them to meet the rest of the church. And also to get the rest of the church used to what Messy Church was. So, we didn't have the full Messy Church experience, but we had activities that we expected the congregation, old and young, to join in with, and things like that. We did that. After COVID, we changed our Messy Church, and we moved from midweek after school to Sunday afternoon, because that's when we had people available. And the families are really slow to come back to church after COVID. And, my leadership team were lamenting for months, where are all our families gone? Well, I knew where they were. They're on Sunday afternoon at Messy Church. And I kept saying to them, I know where the families are. Took them over 6 months before any of them bothered to come and look. And eventually, my treasurer came to look, whose grandson was coming to Messy Church, and really loved it. So then he got the message, and then they start to get the message. Actually, this is where our families have decided to come Sunday afternoon rather than Sunday morning. And for me, that's fine. I'm open and flexible to that kind of thing. You just meet people where they are. I think that's the important thing. Sorry, I've waxed on a lot. Do you want to say anything?
Just one comment, really. When you have kids and people of all ages say to you that they are counting the sleeps until the next Messy Church, then I think that says it all, because I don't often hear that about Sunday church.
Oh, and are you sure?
Yes, so it's interesting observing after 40 years of active ministry in the church, it's as if there's two models, and that there's Messy Church is emerging as a new model of being church, while the old model of pews and hymns and liturgy is coexisting alongside it. And sometimes the relationship is not an easy one, but building bridges is a good way of bringing about some rapprochement there. You do have to work, I think, if you're a church leader, you have to work to get your other leaders, lay and ordained, to understand and accept that Messy Church is a new way of doing and being church, and not something designed to feed more people into the Sunday morning congregation.
You said it's a new model, but I actually don't think it's a new model. I think it's a very ancient model because, I think it was the Reformation which meant we had this model of people coming every week to church to hear the teaching. Actually, in England, just before that, when the Church of England was founded, if you didn't go to church on a Sunday, you got fined. Yeah, and that's why Baptists got into a lot of trouble, because we ended up in prison sometimes and meeting outside towns in hiding. But if you go back into the late medieval period, people didn't go to church every week. They were working on the farms. They mainly went at festivals. Christmas, Easter, we had a lot more festivals in the calendar. People went every couple of months to church to join in the worship, and it was a different pattern. And maybe we're rediscovering another ancient pattern that we've done.
Sorry, any more questions?
And I think we're also discovering the ancient patterns that many of us have forgotten, that where so much of our festivals and our seasons are governed around the cycles of the moon. And so sociologically, in Australia, things that run either once a month or weekly succeed, because it's a regular pattern that's part of that lunar cycle in the 12 months of the year. At least that's what I'm... Sorry? 13. But it's one of those regular patterns that comes around, and it's things that far more we are attuned to ancient, in terms of ancient culture and practice. And so the weekly thing... And I say to people, if they're going to fortnightly to do something fortnightly, in Australia, it won't grow, it will just die, because that's what's been proven over the last 50 to 100 years of church research. If you go fortnightly, it just limps along and then slowly peters away, because it's not regular enough.
Interesting. Any further intriguing questions? Peter?
I'm privileged to work within two congregations, and both are running Messy Church. One of the issues that I see in them, and I think is real to everyone else, is that we are not really reaching the non-churched or the unchurched. We're reaching groups from other churches. The two questions I've got are, what need are we meeting, and how can we build on that? And in other words, I'm not saying anything about whether it should be leading to Sunday worship, but how do we grow that? What's the need that we're meeting there? And the second thing is, how do we reach the non-churched?
Could you repeat the first question?
First part of that.
What need are we meeting when it is necessary for people who are members of other congregations on a regular basis are coming to us, and there's two us's in there in two different settings, are coming to Messy Church and stay? I mean, we're obviously meeting a need, but I don't know what it is.
For some of the families that come to us, they are from other churches. Why they come to us for Messy Church is they stay together. They're not sent off to different rooms to do different things. They're exploring faith together. And they're eating together, they're praying together, they're hearing the story together, they're going home and talking about what they've heard and experienced and prayed together. And it goes on through the month. And we send home prayers for them to do together during the month. And because they've done that together, it is then part of that family culture. So that is why most of our families that come from another church are coming to us for Messy Church.
Some of us have different generations that belong to different churches, and that's the one thing that they can come together. Like we have a few families that are 3 generations where they're worshipping together, grandparents, children, well, parents, children, and then their grandchildren. And they're really looking at that. It's also a safe place for grandparents to bring their grandchildren to do that whole wandering place, because it's not Sunday morning where they might get endangered in the eyes of their parents. The next part of the question that you're asking, Peter, is we've been challenging our Messy Church families to invite people who aren't part of any church to come along and try it for 2 or 3 months. And we generally say to them, you've got to say to them, not just once, you round them up for 2 or 3 months and invite them. And once they've been there 2 or 3 months, generally they know the rhythm, they know what things are generally going to happen, and they look forward to the food.
I think it helps in terms of reaching people who are kind of unchurched. And I use that word carefully because often we mean people who don't come on a Sunday morning. I think it helps if you have contacts in the community with people beyond Sunday morning. So what helped us when we started Messy Church up, we had 2 toddler groups running during the week. So we had a lot of families already coming into the building. We had a community lunch once a week. So we had some of the same families coming into the building. We had, and this may be more difficult in Australia or New Zealand, we had really good links with the schools. John, our youth and children's pastor, was regular in the schools. We had other youth and children's activities running. We had a schools project where they came in at Easter and Christmas to explore the stories. We had a lot of those connections, but the one thing we found Messy Church gave us actually was a more focused spiritual connection rather than those more social connections. So that helped us. And I think if you don't have that, you have to work harder on generating relationships in your community. It's not a magic bullet. I mean, I think this is what I see happening time and time again in the UK church. We know we're declining. We know we're more marginalised. So we constantly look for the magic bullet. Alpha Course is great, but it doesn't necessarily transform a church. Or we get this new initiative and it's bigged up. And so churches try it and it kind of fades away. So we're always looking for those magic bullets, but it's a great value in slowly building up relationships with people. That's how the early church grew. They didn't have programs for the first 200-300 years. They just had relationships. And they drew people in like that. And I think we do the same. Yeah.
We have a lovely little Sri Lankan family coming to our Messy Church in Wanganui. And Mum is the head kindergarten teacher in one of our low decile areas. And she was invited by one of the relief teachers to come along to Messy Church. And so she comes along with her little 4-year-old boy. And they're not from a Christian background, but they ask lots and lots of questions. And they have said Messy Church is their church.
So how are we doing for time?
We're in Dave's time now.
We're in Dave's time now. So thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you for your responses. I hope you've all gained something from that. So give them a little bit of a hand.